My name is Alexander Hsu. I am a teaching professor at the Ansari Institute for Global Engagement with Religion, and I'm joined here today. I'm delighted to be joined here today by David Moe, who is a PhD candidate at Asbury Theological Seminary in Kentucky. He is originally from Myanmar, formerly known as Burma, a Buddhist dominant country with an ethnic Chin Christian minority background in Southeast Asia. His research interests are Buddhist nationalism and ethnic conflict in Southeast Asia, Asian public theology of religions, liberation, reconciliation, and world Christianity. He has published one book called Pitu Dukkha Theology, a paradigm for doing dialectical theology of divine suffering and human suffering in the Asian Burmese context in 2017, and has published numerous scholarly articles in encyclopedia, book chapters, and academic journals. He serves on 4 editorial teams, journals like the International Journal of Public Theology, the Journal of Religious Studies, Intercultural Theology, Missiology, an International Review, and Asian American Theological Forum. And he has been actively participating in the protests against the Myanmar military coup as a public speaker and as a panel speaker at some institutions, including Harvard's Religion and Public Life program in the US, Yonsei University in South Korea, the University of Oxford in the UK, and others. So glad to have you here with us today. Thanks for making the time.
Thank you so much, Alex, for this time.
So we typically begin these conversations by allowing my conversation partner or Mahan's conversation partner to briefly give an account of themselves and how they find themselves in the position that they are in today. An accomplished author and someone about to get their PhD. What journey have you been on? And how has that journey taken you through academia and religion?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alex, for this time. As you kindly introduced me, I'm from Myanmar originally, and from the ethnic Christian minority background. And my particular interest in theology is what we will call a public theology, which is not a new term, but the way I understand it is that as a Christian, I would like to engage with 3 different communities: engaging with the church, engaging with the academic community. So the church is not quite academic community, which is more grassroots community, right? And engaging with academic community. And engaging with the 3rd community, what we'll call it, public society, where Christians and people of other religions live together. So that really is my interest in how we should engage with the church, with the academic community, and the public society. So I really want to engage these 3 communities. So that is what I have been doing in my writings as well as in my talk. So now I just wrote my dissertations on what I call it grassroots Asian public theology, and discerning how Christians should engage with these 3 communities. So that is what I'm doing, and I really enjoy writing these dissertations, and I'm expecting to defend in the fall.
Congratulations on this huge achievement, this huge accomplishment. So hearing about Myanmar in the news over the last couple of years, we often hear about a Buddhist majority, a Burman majority, and a Rohingya minority. But you yourself are a Christian, so there are actually even more communities in Myanmar than we, less practiced readers of the news in the US might know about. Can you tell us a little bit about which state you're from in Myanmar, where that is in Myanmar,
yes.
And what life was like growing up?
Yeah, that's right. Myanmar is a Buddhist country, a Buddhist dominant country, and I belong to the Chin ethnic minority group, which is on the western part of Myanmar, and which is more hilly side. You know, if you have been to Myanmar, you will see most of the Burman majority live in the central part of Myanmar, in the lower part and in the central part. But most of the ethnic minorities live in the mountain area, in the upper part, right? So some Christians majority group called Kachin lives on the northern part, and Chin lives on the western part of Myanmar, and Karen live on the southeast, like on the border of Thailand. So this is how these three different ethnic minorities, those who represents Christianity live. And I belong to Chin ethnic group. And so most of the Burmans are Buddhists. So to be a Burman is to be a Buddhist. That's a cultural assumptions. And to be a Chin is to be a Christian, or to be a Kachin is to be a Christians. So even though we belong to the minority ethnic group, what I will call it, Christianity is the majority religion of the minority ethnic group. That is how we see Christianity is growing in Myanmar.
How different is the Christianity you practiced growing up from the Christianity we might see here in the US that we might be more familiar with? At Notre Dame, I teach, for the most part, a majority Catholic background, but world Catholicism is very diverse, and there are lots of different forms of Catholicism and lots of different students that I encounter. And I myself come from a more Protestant background. And so, you know, my sort of allegiances, my friends are from all different kinds of Christianities. So how would you describe your Christianity in the sort of family of various Christianities that there
Thank
are,
you.
especially here in the US?
Sure. So I belong to the Protestant group, Presbyterian group, right? So and Catholic is of course the majority in Myanmar, and is the second, I think, majority group in terms of this Protestant group, and I belong to Presbyterians. And you know, in Myanmar, this denominationalism is, I mean, so much, you know, divisions among these denominations. You know, Catholic has nothing to do with Presbyterians, and President has nothing to do with. So those kind of things has been happening, I mean, among these denominations. But in this current movement, the military coup, the protest against the military coup, some religious groups come together as one people of Myanmar to resist the military coup. That is something really we appreciate. You know, that is something, a good opportunity coming out of this evil movement.
Were there previous moments where at least the various denominations of Christianity came together and recognized themselves as a community that could not speak in opposition to the Buddhists per se, but to violent powers that were oppressing them?
Yes,
there were.
Yes. And then just to add that point, you know, living in Myanmar, where Buddhism is the majority, not just majority, but a Buddhist nationalism's problem. So as the ethnic Christians, we always face some Christian discriminations, right? And the ethnic cultural assimilations. So that is what's happening. And I mean, particularly discrimination has been a major issue in Myanmar. So for example, if you belong to the ethnic minority Christian group, either you are Chin or maybe Kachin or whoever, you will face some discriminations when you applied your job in the public society. Because, you know, in our national identity card, we have to mention religions, Christians or Buddhists, and ethnicity, Chin or Kachin or Burman. So if they see this kind of identities on your card, you will face some discrimination. That's why some Christians are converted to Buddhists in order to avoid this kind of discriminations. So that is really happening in our country.
Do you have any anecdotes from childhood or your hometown? You mentioned that you were from a town called Mindat in Chin State. Examples of either Buddhist conversion or Buddhist discrimination against Chin Christians?
Yes. You know, since I didn't apply any jobs in my time, I didn't experience it explicitly, but I have seen some people, those who experience that Christian discriminations. One of my relatives uh, uh, was also converted to Buddhism because he wants to get a higher positions in in the police, job applications. So this kind of things is really happening in our country.
And what does conversion entail? How does that play out, either ritually, theologically? Because I can imagine, I mean, one thing that we talk a lot about in Buddhist studies is that it doesn't have the same kind of creedal form as Christianity, right? There's no belief is not necessarily at the center of practice. People can sort of come in and out of Buddhism, right? In a lot of forms of Thai Buddhism, the youths all become monks and then they leave, right? Almost all of them leave immediately. So they still remain Buddhist, lay Buddhists, but they aren't permanently monks. And it seems like, you know, uh, you can still potentially be Christian and superficially pay homage to, right, the Buddhist tradition in order to say that you've converted. Is it primarily a bureaucratic thing, conversion, or
Well,
does it?
Alex, I think it depends on each person's. I think some people thinks that, I mean, conversion to another religion has to do with both belief and practice. Some people think that the way we believe shapes the way we practice, right? So uh, I think that's really happening. And also, if you really converted to another religions, you will also face another discriminations from your, I mean, old religious practice. So sometimes some people want to hide that, but so far I know, once they are converted to another religions, I think they want to believe and then they want to practice the way how they believe.
So growing up, did you have both Christian friends and Buddhist friends? And
Yes,
yeah.
yes. Particularly my hometown, Mindat is interesting town. Mindat is home to three religions, which I call ABC. A stands for animism or primal religion, now we call it. And B stands for Buddhism, right? And then C stands for Christianity. So A, B, C. So I grew up in that town and I have several friends, those who are Christians, those who are Buddhists, those who are, and right, those who are primal religious practicing. So, I mean, my hometown is quite interesting, even though that is in the Chin state, the Christian majority state, but my hometown is a particularly interesting place where these three religious practice exist, together.
So Mindat,
Yes,
thank you
Minda.
for that. That was a great background. Mindat was in the news just last month. So the
Yes,
military coup happened at the beginning of February, February 1. And then in May, you actually contacted me because you want to draw even more attention to the situation in Mindat. The military had come into Mindat and invaded in mid-May, I want to say.
yes,
What
yes.
what what precipitated that, and what is the situation like now? We're recording this in early June.
That's true. That's true. So here's the thing. My hometown is a very small hometown. Even some people inside Myanmar might not know Mindat. It's not a famous town. It's a small one, and it's a small town, and it's not a famous town. But when uh, the military coup declare martial law in this town, then Mindat become a famous town inside Myanmar, right? So of course it's not very famous here in the international community, but it becomes a very famous now inside Myanmar. So here's the thing, people in different parts of Myanmar and people in Mindat has been protesting against the military every day, very active. They are very, very active. And so in the mid-April, the tensions between the military junta and the local civilians become more intense, particularly at a time when National Unity Government was formed on 16th of April. So National Unity Government was formed to confront the military government, right? So technically now we have two governments in Myanmar, in one nation. So when the local civilians obviously supported National Unity Government, so the military junta was trying to be more, how to say, violence against the local residents, those who protest against the military government, right? So the military government arrested 7 protest leaders and detained them in a jail, and some of the local residents, asked the police to release them, and they promised that yes, we will release, but they didn't release. So at the end, this is how the serious fight between the military junta and the local residents was happening now. So now Mindat is the place where martial law has been imposed, and the first town ever in Chin State to be under martial law. And the local residents still fight against the military government with the homemade hunting rifles, which we call dumitanat. They use those guns for hunting. This is how they are fighting against the military government. So until now, they are still, fighting against this military government, even though the town is under martial law. So now here's interestingly, Alex, 90% of the local residents fled to jungles and the nearby villages because they don't want to live under the military government in our hometown. So now the military junta is also trying to attack those the Minda people, those who fled to the jungles, because they want them to come back to the town so that the military government can rule human beings. So now, since 90% of the local residents fled, only animals are left behind in our town. So the military government don't want to rule some animals, right? They really want the people to rule. So now they are trying to attack each refugee camp so that the local residents, those who fled to the jungles, could come back to our town and to live under the military coup. That is what's happening right now, interestingly.
So how are the people getting along? Are they've abandoned the town and they just have camps out in the forests, in the jungle, and they're taking shots at the military when they can with their hunting rifles?
Yes, yes, that's right. And in the nearby villages, there are some churches like Roman Catholic churches or Baptists or Presbyterians, and the public schools become the shelters for those IDP, internally displaced people. When the military attacked those camps, they just fled to another place, another jungle, to seek safety. That's what's happening. This is really terrible. What the military government doing is really, really brutal. It's it's unacceptable.
So I can understand that from a Christian perspective, that this is domination. It's against Christian teaching. And I can see people protesting on those grounds, using theology as a sort of resource. I also, hear from Buddhist friends and from my own understanding of the Buddhist tradition that this is also a so-called religion of peace, and they would oppose these violent actions. How does religion play into this, both at the at the capital, and where the military is the strongest, and in places like Mindat, where the military might not be as strong, but religion might be stronger, and there might be Buddhists that act on peaceful principles, or on peaceful in their idea of peace, which is that the military should rule and dominate everyone.
That's right. Thank you. This is a very great question. Buddhism is a religion of peace and compassion and nonviolence. That's how we understand, right? That's true. But on the other hand, what the military government doing is really violent, which is contradictory to what they believe. So that is what's happening. And so here's the thing. those local residents, it's not just the people in Mindat, but the civilians in all parts of Myanmar are now trying to come up with guns, some, because they feel that this, what the military government doing is so violent that we really need for self-defense. Of course, the civilians don't like violent fight, but they feel that we really need self-defense. If we don't have any weapons for our self-defense, just the military will kill us every day. So we need some weapons for our self-defense. In that case, violence is happening on both sides, clearly, right? That's very clearly it. Violence in the beginning, violence is on one side, on the side of the military government, but now violence is on both sides. And of course, from a Christian perspective, we also, questioning about this, whether we should really take up guns and to fight against. And it's not, the local resident will say that, well, this is not our choice actually, but this is our last resort for our self-defense. And some of Christians even prioritize the Old Testament over New Testament. I talked to some of my friends in Mindat, those some of them are Christians, of course. They say, well, in the Old Testament, the people of Israel also fight against this kind of enemy, and they really like the book of Psalm. They say now is the time to read the book of Psalm and how God protect his people, from their enemies. And of course, they really like this Sermon on the Mount, but they say in this context, that could not be very effective. So let us read Old Testament. That is how, some local Christians in Mindat are telling me. So, again, violence is on both sides now. Again, the local residents feel that this is for their self-defense. So it's very hard to convince them that let's do non-violence. Definitely they love non-violence, but they feel that non-violence is not the only way to defeat this military government, because they say they have been ruling us for almost 70 years, and we are trying to do in a non-violent way, and it's not effective enough. So now let us practice both non-violence and violent resistance. And some of them even say that this is post Aung San Suu Kyi method of resistance. As you know, Aung San Suu Kyi is a Buddhist practitioner. She really liked to practice non-violence, but this minority ethnic group feel that, well, now we need to go a little bit beyond Aung San Suu Kyi's method because it was not successful enough. So now let us use both non-violent and violent way of resisting against military government. Like, for example, non-violent ways is like CDM movement, civil disobedience movement, right? So many civil servants resign from their work in order to protest against this military government. But military government trying to do some violence against them, arresting them, bring them and put them in jail. So now that's why the local residents come up with the guns to protect those, civil disobedient movement participants. So this is what's happening. It's very, very complex.
So what, I imagine that there are Buddhists as well in Myanmar who are fighting against the government. Are they also taking the mode of nonviolent resistance, Aung San Suu Kyi's, sort of mode of nonviolent resistance, or are they joining with other groups and saying we need to go a little bit further than that, right? Join with people of other religious backgrounds, the animists, the primalists, the Christians, the Muslims, in order to defend ourselves, or are they more likely to follow in Suu Kyi's camp of, we'll just be arrested if we need to be arrested, and we can be a truth force, right? In Gandhi's sort of language of, and that just being moral exemplars will make the military back off.
Yes, there are two different groups of Buddhists, those who still joined Aung San Suu Kyi method of nonviolence. Mostly those people are the civil servants, right? They joined the CDM, what we call Civil Disobedience Movement, CDM. Those are, of course, nonviolent practitioners. But on the other hand, many Buddhists joined the army training, what we call it now, People Defense, PDF, People Defense Force. So many Buddhists joined this army training to fight against the military government. So now most of these, the Burman Buddhists joined, Kachin ethnic armed groups, and then Karen, in order to get some army training. And some of them are now coming back to the town and do some, what we call it, social punishment, to kill some people, those who give report about what the civil people are doing to the military government. So this kind of thing is really happening now. So again, Buddhists joined both nonviolent and violent way.
Well, this ties into a piece that you wrote in February for the Georgetown University's Berkeley Center called "Is Buddhism a Democratic Religion?" And your answer, I think, is something like yes and no. But what's your quick answer for those in the audience who don't have the time to read the piece all the way?
Thank you, Alex. I think my answer is yes. When I say yes, I don't want to bring my Christian voice to this. I just want to listen to what the Buddhists will answer, right? Because that is not my religion. I need to respect their voice. So based on what the intellectual Buddhist answer is yes, so I will say yes. Like for example, one of the university professor who was a Buddhist in Myanmar in the 1960s, Uchanton, he's a lawyer also, and he said yes, Buddhism is a democratic religion. And one of the Sri Lankan monk also said that yes, Buddhism is a democratic religion. And one of the Indian Buddhist or Hindu converted Buddhists, Dr. Ambedkar, I think you know him, right? He also said, yes, Buddhism is a democratic religion. That's why I was converted from Hinduism to Buddhism. That's what I would say. So let's see here. The way we understand democracy might be different, slightly different from one another, right? But when we say Buddhism is democratic religions, I am interested in the individual freedom, respecting for the will of individual freedom. So Buddhism teaches that we cannot intervene people's rights. We can tell the people what to do. There's self-dependence, self-will. So, and then non-violence, and then human rights, not just human rights, but human responsibility for the common good of society. All those are, in my view, the democratic principles of Buddhism. So based on these, yes, Buddhism is a democratic religion. That's why I'm just trying to asking the Buddhist military government in Myanmar, well, Buddhism is a democratic religion based on their teaching, but what the military government doing is un-Buddhist. So my goal is that we have to liberate those military governments to know that their religion is a democratic religion, and it has a beautiful teaching, and why they are not practicing what their religious teaching. That really is my purpose.
And have people responded well to your argument? Are there Buddhist members either of the military or people that supported the military that have read your argument or the argument of people that work with you and have made similar arguments and expressions? Have they come over? I mean, we have, you've been here in the United States, and you know that our sort of conversation about religion and politics has been especially fraught in the last year. But there are, moments where we can call upon other people's religious leanings to get them to see democracy in a different light, right?
Yeah, that's right. It has been, I'm humbled to say that it has been widely read by, some scholars. I think you might know him, Dr. Peter Phan, who is teaching at Georgetown University. He's a Vietnamese American, and then Amos Young from Fula, and Stanley Howard was also reading, and he sent me, David, this teach me that I'm also a nationalist without knowing it. So they really appreciate the way I approach so far. I'm very happy to hear that those great scholars are reading. So, but on the other hand, some of my fellow Christians in Myanmar are a little bit more critical of it. And what they said is interestingly, they said, David, the military leaders are not Buddhists. That was what they told me. They are not Buddhists because they don't practice what the Buddha is teaching. So they said is they are just this kind of like what they call it. They are full of evil spirits. Like all these Satans and all the evil spirits are in their hearts, and they are not Buddhists. That was what some of the Christians in Myanmar told me. They are more critical of my writing, and but I still understand what they mean. But for me, since the military leaders are also self-claimed Buddhists, I still want to see them as Buddhists. But we still need to see them paradoxically, in my view. Some Buddhists are moral Buddhists. Some Buddhists are amoral Buddhists. So the military leaders are amoral Buddhists. Of course, they're still Buddhists, but they are amoral Buddhists. That's why my purpose of writing this is that to liberate them so that the oppressed people will be liberated from their oppressions. So my interest in liberation theology is on both sides. We need to liberate the oppressor first in order to liberate oppressed from the oppressors. So that really is my goal. And again, I see them as amoral Buddhists, even though the way they practice contradicted to the teaching of the Buddha.
So when there is a vote, right? The vote has voted against the junta, against the military, quite often. But the calling out, right, of the military to say, you claim to be Buddhists, but you're not. The rhetoric is not just geared at the leaders, but the people keeping the leaders in charge, right? The minority of people that would vote for them potentially, right, in a fair and free democratic election. So are you also trying to reach powerful Buddhists everywhere in Myanmar? Or because you talked about your international scholar audience, right? Stanley Hauerwas at Duke. That's great. It's good that he also sees that this is an important issue, and fellow Christians in Myanmar. But is it also aimed at majority Burmans, right? Burman Buddhists.
Yes. So far I don't know whether some Buddhists in Myanmar will read it. I'm not very sure, Alex. I hope I could make it readable among those Buddhists and see what is their comments. And I don't know. I really don't know what might be their response until they read it. So I don't think I can answer for them. Definitely, that's.
Is there a large Burmese population here in the U.S. that read English, and are the Burmese diaspora, are they typically pro or against the military?
I think yes. Yeah, there are a good number of Burmese community here. Some are Buddhists, particularly they live in California.
Mm-hmm. And do they typically support the military?
Oh no, Alex, so far I think 90% of Burmese diaspora in the West, I don't think they support military government. Most of them support this, the democratic government.
So tell us a little bit more about your dissertation research, which you're defending in the fall. Congratulations on that again. Again, right, with a dissertation, one of your major audiences are the people reading your dissertation, the 3 or 4 people that have to sign off and say, yes, go out in the world with a PhD. But hopefully, other people will read it as well. What do you hope a broader public might gain from it? Is it generally written for other practicing Christians in leadership, world Christians, so to speak, or are you hoping again for a bigger audience?
Well, I am, of course, aiming for a larger group if possible, and what can you hear me, Alex? My internet is not stable. Can you hear me?
It was slowing down a little bit, but I think you're back.
That's right. The internet is not very stable in my side here. Oh, I'm trying to achieve three goals from this writing. First, I'm trying to propose a methodology that is trying to fill the gap between academic community and grassroots community, particularly grassroots Christian community. So, I mean, I have been in the academic community for many, many years, but the way we write is always addressed to our own academic people. I am not sure that all of our writing are understandable or comprehensible to the lay people, to the lay Christians. So I'm really trying to fill the gap between academic community and grassroots community. So particularly doing public theology is very much urgent in this methodology. Because in my view, most of academic people living in the academic community are writing a lot, but we don't perform what we are writing very well. So for me, I feel that those ground Christians are really performing public theology without knowing it. You see, even in Myanmar now, most of the leaders are the grassroots, these young people. They practice public theology without knowing it. They perform it implicitly. But most of people here in the academic community are writing so much, but we don't perform it as much as we should do. So what I'm trying to do here is, well, we should do public theology together with the grassroots people, those who really practice it. And they also have some problems too, especially among grassroots Christians. They have a lot of problems. I mean, Alex, as you might know, even here in the US, those grassroots Christians are the ones who support someone, right? You know what I mean, right? So those grassroots Christians are also have some problems too. For me, is we really need to come up together and do public theology together with those grassroots people, and then shape them and transform them, as well as we should also be transformed by their practice. That really is my goal. So my first goal is to fill the gap between grassroots and academic community. That really is my my approach, particularly in Asian theology. That was my approach. The second that we should learn from my dissertation is the paradoxical role of religions in nationalism, particularly Buddhist nationalism. So as I mentioned earlier, there are two forms of Buddhism in Asia: amoral Buddhisms and moral Buddhisms, right? What we understand is, of course, a moral Buddhism. That was how we were taught. But looking at what is happening in Myanmar, what is happening in Thailand, or what is happening in Sri Lanka, particularly in these three countries, they are, I mean, the rise of these Buddhist nationalisms. So that really is also my my approach in my dissertations, and I'm just trying to explore the root cause of those nationalism. What might be the root cause of those nationalism? So without understanding the root cause, it's also very hard to transform those Buddhist nationalism. So I'm just trying to understand and trying to discern what really is the root cause. That really is my interest, So we might say that, well, the root cause of Buddhism is anti-Westernism. That was how happening in the colonial world, right? In the colonial period. So nationalism, Buddhist nationalism was formed, at a time when British was ruling our country. So that was the first root cause, right? But in the second root cause might be in the post-independence era. So Buddhist nationalism emerged as anti-non-Buddhist people, especially those who are Christians, those who adopt Western Christianity, or those who are not Buddhist, like, for example, Rohingya, those who are Muslims. That really is how, this Buddhist nationalism is happening in the post-independence era. That really is my, my explorations of the root cause of this Buddhism. And that is the second thing that we should learn from my dissertations. And the third is how amoral Buddhisms could play a role in reconciliations or even in liberations in dialogue with prophetic Christians. You see, in that case, this is how religious dialogue is happening. So that really is my goal, Alex. Based on this, you might have some more questions.
Sure. I think one sort of useful dichotomy that you've proposed between amoral and moral Buddhism, a Buddhism that adheres to the best of what Buddhism proclaims itself to be, holding it to that standard. I was sort of exploring with my classroom this whole year these sort of dynamics with American Christianities and their support
Yes,
for various forms of Christian nationalism as well.
yes,
Could we use that topology there as well? Amoral Christianity and moral Christianity, in which
absolutely, Alex. That's a good point.
and in which case, you're not denying for those amoral Christians that Christianity is a vital component of their identity. You're not denying that of them. You're saying, I understand that this is important to you and makes the world for you and is everything. And we want to respect that in our dialogue with you. But that's one thing that jumped out immediately to me. Another question that I had was the framework of liberation Christianity as the dialogue partner for amoral Buddhism. And I'm wondering if there couldn't be a four-way dialogue between amoral Buddhists and moral Buddhists and liberation theology Christians and amoral Christians, I guess. If that might be an interesting a dialogue, or if that's not where your work is headed.
Right. I mean, that's a bit complicated, right? We have to choose the right dialogue partners, whether we should be in dialogue with amoral Buddhists or moral Buddhists. In my view, as a Christian, I think we should first engage or dialogue with amoral Buddhists. From them, learn more about their Buddhist teaching. I mean, as we are Christians, right? We still need to learn from amoral or moral Buddhists, right? What really is their religious teaching? Learning from them and in partnership with them. And the next is to engage with amoral Buddhists. Of course, in that case, we might even confront, right? That really is my approach, Alex. So we should, dialogue with moral Buddhists first. After a deeper understanding of what Buddhism is, then we can engage with amoral Buddhism.
That sounds like a reasonable plan of action.
Yes, yeah, that really is. Otherwise, I mean, if you engage first with amoral Buddhists, we might get some wrong answers from them.
Right.
That is my fear.
Well, thank you for spending some time with me today to tell me about your work and your story. I think that listeners might feel the urge to help in some way, even if the first thing they can do to help is just to read and learn and listen. But if people feel the urge to help either your project or to get the military coup out of power, what do you recommend, a reasonably powerful American could do or should do?
Well, people, I mean, in my country are desperately need the American people to do a more effective way. We don't know exactly what is the more effective way, to be honest. Even though they appreciate that this Biden and his administrations are doing some economic sanctions on the, the military leaders, right? But, my people really need a more effective way. If possible, they even urge to intervene this military government. That really is their need, like R2B, that was what they're really expecting in the past through this UN, but it didn't work. So, I mean, I really don't know exactly what is the most effective way, but they really need these more international communities cooperations. Particularly what they really want is that they ask the American government to recognize NUG, National Unity Government. They really want them to recognize this government so that they can together resist the military government. That is, I think, the first important step that the government should do here in the U.S.
Reading about Burmese nationalism, about right-wing nationalism, right now it's quite harrowing. Any sort of critique that is shared with right-wing nationalists. I'm thinking about a book by John Holt that I assigned for my students about what he calls the Buddhist and Muslim crisis in a recent book that he published. and he tries to speak with some of the leaders of Mabata, right, and to
Yeah.
say, don't you see how bad this is? Don't you see how amoral this Buddhism is? And they just feel that the international community is picking on them, and that we're telling lies about them, so that any kind of intervention, if it's perceived as coming from the West, will be seen by at least a minority of Burmans, the ones that are in power right now, as illegitimate. And I'm wondering if there are other ploys to, at least other Buddhist countries, right, whether it's Sri Lanka, Thailand, in the Theravada orbit, that have recognized, the non-military government, if that would also confer legitimacy to the cause.
Exactly. Alex, you might know, actually, the civilian government really expected Southeast Asian nations, like we call it ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, uh, to stand with this NUG. But unfortunately, I think they stand with military government. That's really surprising. So that's very disappointing as well. And I mean, including Thailand. Thailand itself is also a dictator nation, right? So they also stand with this military government. And Sri Lanka, we don't know, but at the level of this grassroots Buddhists, they seems to stand with, I mean, these democratic nations, but we don't know at the government level and other, because in Sri Lanka also there's a high rise of this Buddhist nationalism. Sinhalese Buddhist nationalism is very high. So we're not very sure whether they will stand against military government.
On that lamentable note, I think we'll have to draw this conversation to a close. Thank you again.
Yeah.
And
Thank you so much, Alex.
Do keep surprised of developments. Sometimes positive things can still happen. So could still change overnight. So we're
that's right.
we'll be paying attention.
We are lamenting. We are still hopeful.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, David.